I'm gonna ruin your husband on Saturday. And when I'm done,
You should reconsider.
You're a helpless little housewife who has no power here, So go make yourself useful in the kitchen.
He thought he was intimidating Dia. He just provoked special forces. 3 days ago, you threatened my family. Tonight, your fight license is revoked and your gym is seized.
My 7-year-old daughter was crying so hard she couldn't catch her breath, her tiny hands clutching my jeans as my brother-in-law slammed a pair of worn leather MMA gloves down onto the kitchen counter. The heavy impact rattled the coffee mugs, making my daughter flinch violently. He leaned over the island, his massive frame blotting out the light. A twisted, predatory smirk plastered across his face. "I'm going to tear your husband apart in that cage on Saturday," he spat, his voice echoing off the drywall. "And when I'm done crippling him, I'm coming back to take this house. You're just a helpless little housewife. What are you going to do? Cry?" The room fell dead silent. The rest of the family, my mother-in-law, my sister, the cousins, just stood there, looking at their feet or smirking along with him. They saw a meek, stay-at-home mother in an oversized sweater, clutching her trembling child. They thought I was terrified. He had no idea he had just made the single biggest mistake of his life. But that's not where this story began. 3 months earlier, my husband and I had moved back to my hometown after years away. On paper, I was just a quiet woman who baked cookies for school fundraisers, volunteered at the animal shelter, and preferred to stay out of the spotlight. My husband, a gentle high school history teacher, was a hobbyist martial artist who trained at a local gym just to stay in shape. My brother-in-law, on the other hand, was the local golden boy. He was a regional semi-pro MMA fighter, 6'3", built like a brick wall, and utterly obsessed with power. To him, the family was a hierarchy, and he was at the absolute top. From the day we moved back, he made it his personal mission to assert dominance over my husband and me. It started with small, dismissive comments at family dinners. "Must be nice to work half the year, teacher boy," he'd sneer, slapping my husband on the back so hard it almost knocked the wind out of him. Then came the gaslighting and financial extortion. He convinced my elderly mother-in-law to sign over the deed to her family property, promising he would manage it, only to turn around and try to evict us from the guest cottage we were renting from her. Whenever I tried to speak up, he would cut me off, chuckling condescendingly. "Let the men talk, sweetheart. Go make yourself useful in the kitchen." I never whined. I never lost my temper. I just nodded, pulled my sleeve over the old faded scar on my wrist, and kept my eyes on the floor. He took my silence for weakness. They all did. They had no idea what that scar meant. They had no idea where I had been for 8 years before I met my husband. Remember that detail. It matters later. As the weeks went on, his cruelty escalated. He challenged my husband to a public amateur charity bout at the local arena, framing it as a friendly exhibition. But behind closed doors, he made his real intentions clear. He was going to intentionally injure my husband, ruin his teaching career, and force us out of the city for good. "Your husband is weak," he whispered to me at a backyard barbecue, getting right into my personal space, reeking of alcohol. "And you're a nobody. You have no power here." I looked him dead in the eye, my pulse perfectly steady at 60 beats per minute. "You should reconsider this fight," I said softly. He burst out laughing, calling over his gym buddies to mock the scared little house cat. They had no idea what was coming. The night before the match, the catastrophic mistake happened. My brother-in-law stormed into our home unannounced, drunk on his own ego, demanding my husband sign a waiver, forfeiting his rights to sue if he was permanently injured in the cage. When my husband refused, my brother-in-law pulled out those MMA gloves, threw them down, and threatened my family right in front of my daughter. He thought he was terrifying a helpless mom. He didn't realize he had just triggered a combat response from someone who had survived 3 tours in the dark corners of the globe. You see, nobody in that town knew the truth about my past. They knew I served in the military, but I let them assume I was a clerk or a supply coordinator. What I never told them, what my husband didn't even fully know the extent of, was that I was one of the few women ever integrated into elite special operations combat support units. I had spent years training foreign security forces, mastering hand-to-hand combat, and analyzing tactical psychological warfare in high-threat zones. I wasn't a helpless housewife. I was a battle-hardened Special Forces veteran, and my brother-in-law had just declared war on my family. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, The moment he walked out the door, laughing, I went upstairs, unlocked a heavy steel box in the back of my closet, and took out a satellite phone, an encrypted flash drive, and a black leather notebook. This is where everything changed. My brother-in-law believed he was untouchable because he was sponsored by the region's largest security firm and owned the very gym where the fight was being hosted. He thought he controlled the arena, the referees, and the narrative. He was dead wrong. I made 3 calls. The first was to a former commander who now sat on the State Athletic Commission. The second was to a high-ranking federal inspector in the Department of Labor. The third was to the global CEO of the security conglomerate sponsoring my brother-in-law's fight, a man whose life I had saved during an extraction operation in Kabul 10 years prior. The night of the big fight arrived. The local arena was packed with over 2,000 people. My brother-in-law's face was plastered on giant screens above the ring. He strutted around the cage like a king, surrounded by his entourage, soaking in the cheers of the hometown crowd. My husband sat in his corner, looking nervous, while my brother-in-law smirked at him from across the canvas, making a throat-slashing gesture. I walked down the main aisle, wearing a tailored dark suit, holding a simple manila folder. I didn't take a seat in the stands. I walked straight past the security guards, who instinctively stepped aside when they saw the gold-lettered VIP security clearance badge pinned to my jacket, and walked right onto the apron of the ring. My brother-in-law spotted me and laughed through his mouthpiece. "Get this woman out of here," he shouted into the ring announcer's microphone. "She's losing her mind." The arena grew quiet, confused by the interruption. I didn't flinch. I took a microphone from the table and stepped into the center of the canvas. The referee tried to stop me, but 2 black-suited men with earpieces, federal marshals who had just entered the building, stepped into the ring behind me and raised their hands. The entire arena went dead silent. Dropped drinks, shocked faces, pale expressions. 3 days ago, my voice echoed clearly over the arena's surround sound speakers. "You came into my house and threatened to cripple my husband. You called me a helpless nobody." My brother-in-law's smirk began to falter, a flicker of genuine confusion crossing his eyes. "What the hell is this? Cut her mic." "I spent 8 years in the United States Army Special Operations Command," I said, my voice steady, ice cold, and entirely void of fear. "And while you were busy playing tough guy in local gyms, I was running tactical threat assessments for the Department of Defense." A heavy gasp echoed through the crowd. I opened the manila folder. "As of 6 o'clock tonight, the State Athletic Commission has revoked your fighting license indefinitely due to pending criminal intimidation charges. Furthermore, an emergency audit of your gym revealed 5 years of systematic tax fraud, match fixing, and illegal betting rings." My brother-in-law went deathly pale. The cocky posture vanished instantly. "You're lying. You can't do this." "And lastly," I continued, glancing up at the private box seats, "your primary corporate sponsor has officially severed all ties with you, effective immediately. They have also initiated a civil lawsuit to recover every dollar of funding they ever provided. 100. At that exact moment, the main LED screens above the ring switched from his promo video to a live feed of federal agents and local police raiding his gym downtown, hauling out boxes of seized evidence and computer towers. The crowd erupted into utter chaos. My brother-in-law lunged toward me in a fit of blind rage, but before he could even take 2 steps, the 2 federal marshals tackled him to the canvas, twisting his arm behind his back and snapping steel handcuffs around his wrists. He thrusted his head up from the mat, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes, completely stripped of his arrogance. He looked weak. He looked pathetic. I stepped closer, leaned down, and spoke softly enough that only he could hear. "You looked at me and only saw a quiet mom. That was your first mistake." I turned my back on him and walked out of the ring, taking my husband's hand as we walked down the aisle together through a deafening roar of applause. In the months that followed, the revenge cascade was absolute. My brother-in-law was convicted on charges of grand larceny, fraud, and felony intimidation. His gym was shuttered, his assets were frozen, and he was sentenced to 4 years in state prison. The property he had tried to steal from my mother-in-law was legally restored to her, and my family finally found the peace we had fought so hard to protect. Today, my daughter sleeps soundly in her room, knowing her mother will always keep her safe. I still bake cookies, I still volunteer at the shelter, and I still live a quiet life. But no one in this town ever underestimates the quiet mom down the street again. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were dealing with? Tell me your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more revenge stories every week.